on the larger community call. It's a version of something we've been working on in the past, which is data sharing of smaller IIIF components like transcriptions or layers or range lists with institutions using some sort of discovery mechanism. And the problems that we've been able to achieve the demonstration with relative ease, but the problem up to now has been the hurdles to participation were very high. An institution would have to set up a listening endpoint to listen to available resources, or then they would have to adjust, they'd have to add a service block to their manifest that would point to this service, and that was proving too burdensome to really think that would become something that could catch on. So in collaboration with Patrick Kiva at St. Louis, who I was hoping could be here but couldn't, so I'll just share some of the stuff he did. We set up what we called a regional inbox that anyone could send a notification to, and then I wrote a plugin for Mirador that would default to this inbox if the manifest itself didn't declare that such an inbox exists. This means that any viewer, if it has the plugin, could then be alerted to these notifications, and it puts no burden on the institutions, and it puts a lot of power in the hands of the users, so they're able to turn on, or if they want to see those notifications, they can see them, and then they can decide if they want to bring that extra content in. So I'll just really quickly show you what this looks like in Mirador. You have 5 different manuscripts from, 6 different manuscripts from 6 different institutions. None of them have service blocks, and none of them have their own inbox, and yet I can be in a completely different inbox and have access to related information. So here's a manuscript from the BSB, and as I load it, you see that there's no table of contents here, but you see this little alert here, and that's what the plugin did. It went out, it first checked to see if the manifest had a service block. If it didn't, then it checked an already known regional inbox, and then that inbox gets information about what it is, who it's coming from, and attribution and license data. And that, you could imagine if there were like 6 or 10, then you just have a list of 10 different things here, and a user could decide whether or not they wanted to bring that in. And then pressing retrieve, it goes out to wherever the inbox is pointing. And in this case, it's pointing to our research server at Loyola. And now you have a table of contents that lets you navigate this manuscript. And then you can do the same thing with a Vatican one, which doesn't have a table of contents, and you can retrieve that. So it's similar to what we've done in the past, but underneath the hood, anyone can send a notification now, and anyone can receive it, and institutions don't have to do anything different. One last thing really quickly, the next step would be is just to expand this from table of contents to include transcriptions. So you could imagine I'm annotating a TEI text like so, and if I save that, that annotation gets saved, and when I navigate back to this page, you can see the annotation change. So in the annotation screen on the left, anyone who's opening this manuscript would get a notification that this transcription exists, and they could choose to pull it in the same way that you saw the range list, and it would show up in the sidebar like it does here. So that's, oh, okay, so then one last thing. I'll put a couple of links into, but what's happening is here's the St. Louis inbox, and we've described the basic specification, which is just a series of conventions that the plugin needed to know in advance in order to retrieve them. And so I'll paste that into the chat now. If I can figure out how So it's a very small specification, but we all had to agree on how to structure the JSON. It's built on top of the linked data notification specification, but then we had to specify how are we going to point to the target and how are we going to point to the object. But once you do that, then any client plugin can understand anybody's inbox. So here at the St. Louis inbox, you can just reference all the notifications for any manifest by simply adding the target parameter. And then this is what the Mirador plugin is using. And that's it.
Nice.
So,
thanks, Jeff. Are there any questions?
Here I'll put the Mirador plugin. So this should work. So if anyone wants to do it, you just anywhere you have a Mirador installation, you just add the plugin, and then if there are notifications, they'll show up to your users. But if there aren't, then there'll be no noticeable difference.
Very cool. Thoughts or questions from anyone? Looks like this has a question.
Yeah, the regional inbox is stored. Patrick's storing it in a Firebase database. So there's no specification of how an inbox internally would store that data, but it's on Firebase.
Very cool. Well, thanks again, Jeff.
Thanks.
That's awesome.